Welcome, welcome, welcome. TAMACC, the Texas Association of Mexican American Chambers of Commerce, is so thankful that you could join us for this incredibly important discussion. I am Pauline Anton, and I am honored to serve as the president and CEO of this organization that has been serving Texas since 1975. TAMACC is a statewide umbrella organization for local Hispanic chambers of commerce, and our mission is simple but impactful. TAMACC promotes wealth creation through advocacy, commerce, and leadership. On behalf of the chairman of the board, executive committee, and board of directors, allow me to introduce two very dear friends of mine who are the moderators for the webinar today. Our first moderator is Justice Gisela Triana. Justice Triana is an appellate judge on the Third Court of Appeals in Austin. She is the only appellate judge in Texas who has served on every level of Texas trial courts with over 26 years of experience on the bench. She is well known for being fair, deliberate, courteous, and her willingness to listen to all sides of a case. Justice Triana graduated magna cum laude from the University of Texas at San Antonio. At the age of 22, she graduated from the University of Texas School of Law. She has conducted training sessions for judges all over Texas and has been a faculty member of the University of Texas International Office's U.S. Law Program. She is one smart lady. Our second moderator is J.R. Gonzales. Mr. Gonzales is a nationally recognized communications consultant and professional development trainer. Mr. Gonzales is the executive producer and host of the Latino Business Report podcast. He is a former chairman of the board and a past president and CEO of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. As a business owner, entrepreneur, political strategist, and public speaker, Mr. Gonzales has been a lifelong advocate and voice for issues facing Latino and minority communities. We are thrilled that Mr. Gonzales is currently serving as TAMACC's executive vice chair. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you very much, Pauline, for that introduction. And we're excited to have this today. This is unfortunately a subject that is necessary in today's society. It is getting to be crazy out there. We want to welcome everybody. Just to give you a little heads up, Justice Triana and myself will be asking our guest, Michael Matranga, the questions. And then in the chat, if you have an opportunity, if you have a question towards the end, Gisela and I will be watching that and seeing if we can do that. Ask those questions. This session is being recorded. So once it's recorded by the first next week, we'll have it up and make sure everybody on the call has access to the recording, and will be posted on the TAMACC website. If you're not familiar with TAMACC, Pauline told you about it, but also our website address is tamacc.org. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Gisela, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you, JR?
I am doing great. I am just really excited about this. I know we've been planning this webinar for a couple of months now. I've had the opportunity to interview Michael Matranga on the podcast. That podcast went extremely well. And I said, well, let's go ahead and do a webinar. So that's why we're here today. I, for one, Gisela, I'm interested in finding out more as a business owner of how I can secure my business, how I can train employees, and how we can just maybe mitigate, a situation where, God forbid, if there were to be an active shooter, of knowing what to do. I know everybody's on the call that has their own reasons for being here. I know you have your reasons. What are some of the things you hope to get out of today?
Well, and I tell you, JR, it is sad when we have to think about these things and be proactive about these things. I'm going to start with way back when I was in school, 40 years ago, nobody thought, what do I tell my kid about going to school and being safe, and should I worry whether my kid is going to come home? We went to school and we had fun. We saw our friends, walked home, didn't think twice about it. So it is a shame that we're here, but we are here. And so the purpose of this is to, get people better prepared and thinking about something that most of us don't want to think about. Most of us just kind of want to, put our head in the sand and hope that, okay, it doesn't happen again. But we know that in all likelihood it will. So I'm really interested to talk to Michael about, and welcome Michael to the program. I'm really interested in talking to him about, from the perspective of one, a governmental employee, an elected official. We have had training before on, what to do if you have an active shooter situation in the courthouse. But I'm really interested about, as a mom. So now, when I go to church, what am I supposed to be, looking at? When I go to the supermarket, when I'm in a movie theater, I know that we don't want to freak out people and make it all doomsday, but I do think that there's some really good things. And having spoken to Michael, he's got some, a real good handle on how we can be more proactive in our safety versus just expecting somebody else to take care of it. So that's what here, JR, and hopefully everybody here will get something out of this. And if you're ready, I'm ready to start.
I'm excited about this. And the unfortunate part, just to try to set the table here a little bit, it's unfortunate that last time I looked, which was Friday, and I know it's probably been more since then, but there's already been 441 mass shootings already. 441 mass shootings. We're averaging over 13 mass shootings a week. I mean, that is just totally unacceptable. With that, Gisela, go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
Well, and I was going to say, I don't know, this has not been the latest, but it's been the latest that's been at least in the news, the one we just had in Houston, right, over the weekend. Some guy shooting people after he burned the place where he used to live. And as people were coming out, was shooting them. I think 3 of them died, so it is becoming more and more, unfortunately, a daily occurrence. Obviously a weekly occurrence. So yes.
Tragic. With that, let's go ahead, Gisela, if you wouldn't mind introducing Michael Matranga, and then we'll get started.
Absolutely. Michael, welcome again. We are so happy to have you here. Guys, we have, the best of the best. We have a wonderful expert in this subject matter, Michael Matranga, who is from Galveston, grew up on the coast. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Grew up in Galveston, went to school, got his bachelor's, and then he became a probation officer in Galveston County. I used to be a misdemeanor court judge and can't tell you how valuable my probation officers were. They're the ones who are, making sure and making those life decisions, right? Of who do we think needs to go back? Who is on the right path? Who's not? From there, he joined the Secret Service in Houston, and he went up that proverbial ladder. He worked in the campaign protective detail of President Obama when he was running for office. He was in 2011 the presidential counter assault member. He became part of the presidential detail and then went to the Department of Interior where he was working in Las Vegas and had to do with, if y'all remember, the Bundy Ranch trial that the folks that took up arms in 2014 against the government and was an essential part in that investigation. After that, he came to, after the Santa Fe shooting, as y'all will recall one of our school shootings here in Texas, he came down to the Texas City Independent School District. He was called to come and help them out with their security concerns. And so he came back to, where he started. And he was hired to build the school security program in Texas City ISD. It is the #1 security program, school security program here in Texas, and I believe it's #5 in the nation. So he's done a wonderful job. Since 2019, he started his own company, which is called N6 Global, and he is hired to help school districts, governments, businesses, infrastructure type organizations come up with a security plan and make sure that the people are ready to deal with not only gun shootings, but any other kind of catastrophic emergencies. We're going to start. Thank you once again for being here, Michael. I'm going to start with kind of a silly question just because I like the name M6 Global, and of course, being a big James Bond fan, thought, okay, so does that have anything to do with MI6? Or am I just...
No. When M6 first started, thank you guys for having me, and thank you for everyone who's on the call for taking your time today to listen to some of the very concerning things that we have to deal with in the United States, and not only in the United States, but I know we have some listeners in Mexico. Violence doesn't know any boundaries or borders. And so the same tactics, techniques, and procedures that we utilize here in the state of Texas can be utilized in the nation, and then also overseas in some of our brother and sister countries like Canada and Mexico. So thank you for being here, and thank you guys for having me. But no, M6 Global was initially, M is for Matranga, my last name, and then there was initially 6 founding members of the company, or 6 founding partners. And so we just stuck with M6 Global. We started out regionally here in Texas, and we've quickly expanded to multiple states throughout the United States, and are looking to have an opportunity in another country if someone would have us. So that's how the name came about.
Well, I'm sticking to my story. MI6,
Okay.
you couldn't take MI6, so it was already taken by, the English Security Service. So you just stuck with M6. But
It sounds cooler, and if you're okay, I'm okay with that.
You guys are killing me. You guys are killing me. I swear. Okay, Michael, let me ask you this. We're about to get into it, but one of the things that I'm curious about, I think I know the answer, but I want to ask you, sir, is as we're looking at this increase in violence in a society that has lost all civility and road rage going on. I mean, Texas is the #1 state in the country for road rage when it comes to, with firearms. It's crazy, but have we peaked? Is it going to get any better, or is it going to get worse before it starts getting better? What's your opinion on that?
I don't think I'm willing to say that it's going to get worse before it gets better, or vice versa. But what I will tell you, and I've been stating this for a very long time, is that we're no longer living in the 1980s or the 1990s, where people had somewhat of a threshold of what is civil and what's not civil. I think with the emergence of technology and social media, people's tolerance level has declined. We've just come out of a pandemic. People have been cooped up, they've been in their homes, they've been restricted. So I think people's temperament is very short right now. I myself last week was a victim of road rage. I had an individual who almost hit me in a vehicle. I swerved and honked, and he later chased me down and pulled a weapon on me. And so, thankfully I didn't have my weapon on me. And so I did what you should normally do, is I slowed down, I let him pass, I called the police, and then I relayed information to them where they could get him into custody. So, I just think that our society in general has changed a lot. The dangerous part is that we still have corporations, we still have school districts and administrators in certain school districts that have this mentality that, well, it's not going to happen to me, or it's not going to happen here. This is not the community that we live in. And I will tell you that if it can happen in Santa Fe, Texas, if it can happen in Parkland, Florida, if it can happen in Sandy Hook, it can happen anywhere. And so how we mitigate that is we just become prepared as an institution, as an administration over a school district, but primarily as an individual. I think that's the key. And so do I think that this is going to go away? I do not. I do not think this is going to go away. I do think that we can reduce it if we all do our part individually.
Well, let me ask you to take up on what JR was saying, because, I saw that not only is Texas the highest road rage gun violence state, but it is like triple the next one, which is Florida. So is there something about Texas? I mean, obviously, the legislature passed anybody can carry, and I don't want to get this, make it political, but is there something about our attitude? Why are we so far beyond the rest of the states when it comes to specifically road rage and gun violence?
I do think it has something to do with the Texas mentality. I've traveled to 30 countries and 3 war zones, and Texas is my home state. It'll forever be, in my opinion, the best state in the United States. But there is a certain level of grit to Texans that a lot of other people don't have. We are people who stand on our convictions. We don't like to concede. And I do believe that, our Texas mentality does have a bit to do with that. Also, adding on top of that, We have a legislation that has passed open carry in the state of Texas. And, you know, I'm, like I said, I don't want to get into a political debate of whether I think that's appropriate or not, but I will tell you, I am a Second Amendment advocate, but I also don't think that everyone needs to be carrying a weapon. There's certain people that just don't have the temperament, like the individual last week who pulled a weapon on me for just simply honking and swerving to get out of his way. So, you know, the best thing that we can do as individuals is assess each situation, take a deep breath. I always tell people what's going to keep you primarily safe in the event of a crisis or a situation that's got your heart rate elevated is taking a deep breath, taking a tactical pause, and just giving it a second before you respond and make a decision.
So good. What I'm hearing is for people like me who, you know, aren't taking time to go to the range to shoot or anything, I don't have to own a gun in order to be, you know, at least maximize my safety and fight back, if that's the correct word.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that too often why we see, and, you know, Texas leading the nation in road rage incidents is that too often people resort to using that weapon as their first level of defense rather than using their words. You know, I'm a big fan of de-escalation. Anytime I can de-escalate a situation by simply using my words or injecting some calm into a very chaotic situation, that is always going to be the better solution. So, you know, the best thing that we can do as a society is learn what triggers us. And we can get into social emotional learning, emotional intelligence programs, and how I think that they're crucial for you know, schools is teaching our young kids who are going to grow up and they're going to be adults, teaching them what their triggers are. So yes, I think that you know, moving forward, that we have to do a better job of preparing ourselves mentally and physically for any type of confrontation, and then as a last resort, you know, resort to defending yourself with a weapon should that, you know, be the case.
Michael, let me ask you this. You see a lot of posters and a lot of information out there, and it's a good practice, the run, hide, and fight. Okay, you see a lot of that, and I understand run, hide, and fight. But when you're running, you're hiding, and you're fighting, that means you're already there. You're in a situation you don't want to be in. So how can a person, as you talk about mental preparation, and to Gisela's point, you know, your everyday person walking out on the streets, walking into a store, going into a church, a grocery store, if you're at a soccer game, is there a way to mentally prepare yourself, or what should you be looking for when you're going into a situation and maybe not sure if that's going to be the day that something happens?
Yeah, I think that, you know, looking at, I think that we have some words or titles that have maybe been used, currently used, and even in the past. One that comes to mind that maybe don't fit, you know, the situation. And the first one would be first responder, right? So when we think about first responders, we think about our law enforcement officers and our medical personnel who are going to be responding to an incident, right? And so I think that that is, though accurate, I believe it is also, you know, misconstrued, because let me ask you, here's the thing. A first responder is the person who's first on the scene, correct? If I'm in a shopping center, or if I'm at a, you know, a place of business, or if I'm at a school, and there's a catastrophic event such as an active shooter at Santa Fe or at Uvalde, who is the actual first responder? It's going to be you, the person who's already on the scene. Now, your law enforcement and your medical people are responding. So what I'm getting at, my point is that we have to provide our own level of self-awareness and training, so that in the event that there is a situation there on the scene at the time, you can render aid to yourself or to someone else. And then the law enforcement and medical response is a secondary response. So I think sometimes we get first responder mixed up with, it has to solely be law enforcement or medical people. what I'll tell you is that in almost every situation, the person who's likely going to save you is you. And the person who's likely going to save someone else is you saving them or them saving you. So we have to get to a point in society where we're training ourselves to identify these particular types of behaviors in individuals that are unusual. Maybe someone walks into a church or to an outdoor sporting event or a mass gathering event, and they're wearing a long trench coat at 100-degree weather. That's unusual behavior. Those are things that we have to train ourselves to understand that behavior, that it's not normal, and then for us to then become consciously aware of that individual and then start formulating a plan in the event that that person or group of persons does something that is not normal, like an active shooting, a fight, some type of chaos. And so preparing ourselves for those situations is key. And what does that look like? It could be you taking a CPR first aid class. It could be you learning how to apply a tourniquet or a chest seal application in the event that there's a torso wound. It's you walking around society with your children, understanding where your ingress points, your egress points are in the shopping mall. It's just being consciously aware. But I will caution you, I'm not advocating anybody walk around in a state of panic or mania. It's just having that small situational awareness that helps us to make a better decision in the event that something happens at the time.
So talking about egress and ingress and why that's so important. So my boyfriend, maybe it's his age, maybe it's his redneck upbringing, but every time we go out to a restaurant, he always wants to sit facing the door. It doesn't matter where we are. I already know where my seat is the one not facing towards the door. And he'll sit there and he makes a mental note of, where the windows are, if I need to, and it's a little scary. He's not crazy. Well, he is, but for other reasons, not for that. But he'll sit there and he'll go, okay, there's a window right there. If I need to, I'll pick up that chair, hit it through the window. And that's how and we don't talk about this. This is everything that's going on in his head. How important is that? How important is it to be mindful, okay, if something were to happen, instead of just ducking under this table, which might be my only option, I need to figure out how to get out of here.
Yeah, that is extremely important. And like I said, I want to caution people. I'm not advocating everyone walking around in a state of panic or being manic. But what I'm telling you is just like anything that you do, right? Whether it be, I don't know how to reference this, but whether the first time you do something isn't always probably going to be the best performance, right? And so when you walk into a restaurant, you go to a movie theater and you assess those things. Where's the entries? Where's the exits? How many people are in there? Is there anyone that is, unruly or looks suspicious, or they're exhibiting certain signs and symptoms of pre-attack behavior? You taking the time to identify these things prior to the event is going to help you make that faster decision in response to whatever the situation is. The first time that you have to make that decision, you should not be formulating what you're going to do as the event is unfolding. So, there's a reason why law enforcement officers and military service members and guys like myself who walk into a restaurant like your boyfriend, we sit with our backs to the wall, we watch the exits, we identify those things. And so that when it happens, you already have formulated somewhat in your brain a means to escape or what you're going to do. And I would take it a step further is even though you're identifying those ingress and egress points, maybe you have a situation like in the Pulse nightclub shooting where you couldn't escape, but you've identified what the difference between cover and concealment is. Concealment hides you, cover stops bullets. And identifying those areas. And so, when we were with the Secret Service, if we're standing post, we're always assessing each terrain feature as we're moving through, a building, walking with the president. I'm looking for hard infrastructure pieces like cinder block walls or pillars or a bar that I can hide behind. And so we have to get into this mindset, right? And this culture change where we walk into society and we just think that everything is okay. It's just, taking that 5 to 10 seconds of your time when you walk in somewhere and assessing those things is going to help you make a faster decision in identifying those things prior to an event happening.
Michael, let me ask you this. As Gisela was saying, when you're going in and you have to be aware, you're back to the door, look for the exit route, difference between cover and concealment, all very important factors. But at the same time, as we're looking at this let's look at it from a business standpoint. How can a business owner better prepare, or is there anything that they can do to mitigate, an occurrence that's not, too costly? And is there a place where they can maybe get a template, a plan, a best practice of how to initiate some sort of procedure or protocol in their own business and able to train or prepare their employees for something if it were to occur?
Yeah, so I've always stated that, there's some good templates out there, some good terminology. Like for example, in schools, you have the standard response protocol, which is from the I Love You Guys Foundation. It's the lockdown, lockout, which is secure, shelter in place, hold, and evacuate. And you have the standard terminology. But that is a good start, right? And that can be applied not only in schools, but also in, in businesses and corporations. And so I think that's a good start. But what I'll tell you is there's really no blanket response because your situation, your infrastructure, all that is going to be specific to you, right? So, for example, when we go into schools, we write a district-wide emergency operations plan. And then what we recommend, and we take it a step further than most consultants, is we advise those individuals that they need to have a customized emergency action plan specific to that campus. Well, why? Well, because that campus may have a different building materials. Some may be built out of drywall, some may be built out of residential brick, some are cinder block walls. Each one of those things provide a different ballistic property. How are your vestibules built? Are they free access, or are they somewhat closed access? Your terrain features. You may have an area that has a hill or some type of terrain feature that could either work to your advantage or disadvantage. You may be on a public sidewalk or in a commercial business park. And so we recommend that each business have their own plan. You can have a standard response terminology, but their plan has to be very specific to that particular business, because you're not going to have the same mass gathering area or triage area or emergency landing zone. All of those things need to be pre-planned so that when something happens, you can initiate and activate that plan like it's no problem, instead of having to wait and do it on the fly.
Now, good point. Just very quickly, I know what you said, every business is unique depending on their structure, their layout, the type of walls, everything else. But the plan is not just get out of the building. I mean, there are other things that you mentioned, and we talked about actually before the show, of things I never thought about as far as, where are you going to meet, first aid, what happens, is there communications? Can you kind of give us just a quick little overview of how detailed or how important it is to have details in a plan?
Absolutely. So I have a scenario I want to give you. I was called here by a courthouse here a while back, about a year ago. They wanted us to come out because they had no evacuation plan, no mass notification, no active shooter plan, whatnot. So we go out and we meet with them and we tell them, hey, look, based upon the layout of your courthouse, this is what we're looking at. We submitted a quote, and for whatever reason, they drug their feet and they kind of put us off. They were in that mentality of, hey, I don't think it's going to happen here, right? So we don't hear from them for about a month. And one day the district attorney called me with her hair on fire. And she said that they had a bomb threat and it was mass chaos because guess what? They did not have a plan. And so she asked that I go come back and we requote them, and then we talk about building a customized plan for them. So we do that, and they still are in the same mindset that it's not going to happen again. There's no way that lightning is going to strike twice. Well, I will tell you, that is probably one of the most foolish things that I've heard. You know, what's your peace worth to you? You know, is it worth $5,000 to have a plan? What's the people who patronize your business, or you know, the students that go to your school? What are their lives worth to you? How confident do you want to be in the event of a crisis that you're going to make the right decisions? And listen, here's the thing. This is the one thing that the Secret Service tells us, is that no plan survives the first contact, right? So you have to have a minimum of a plan, and then you have a contingency to that plan. It is constantly evolving so that you're not having to make decisions, you know, as the event is unfolding, and then you, as the responsible party, look like a fool. So you never want to be that person. You know, planning, and I won't say it's free because it costs for us to come do it, but even having that heightened level of situational awareness is free. Have somewhat of a plan. If you can't afford to have my team and I come out, which, listen, we're not going to let money get in the way of us keeping people safe. You need to have somewhat of a plan. You need to think these things through. It's important, and it's absolutely imperative that you do that prior to an event happening.
Well, I would say a couple things. First of all, you know, the chances that my house is going to catch on fire are probably not very good, but I have insurance for that, right? I pay for my insurance because that once in a lifetime chance that it might happen, I want to be prepared. And that's with a house. It's an inanimate object. It's not people. So I totally agree that you have to have a plan. You know, like I said, when I was on the district bench, we went through our drills. You know, we knew our exit, and we actually went and did it, which is my next point, which is not just having a plan, right? It's all great. You have a plan, you put it away, and, you know, something happens, and then you're looking through your plan. Okay, what is it that we're supposed to do? Part of having a plan is actually going through it, you know, more than once. Make sure that, you know, whether you have known or you know, surprise exercises, that everybody is on board. When you have a new person that comes into work, that they understand what the plan is, correct?
Correct. Yes, 100%. So, you know, when I was with the Secret Service, you know, I was a counter assault team operator. You know, our instructors used to tell us, hey, listen, it takes 10,000 repetitions to become proficient in anything. And what I'm telling you is, it doesn't matter if it's corporations or if it's school districts. What we're seeing in this space, and why we're continuing to see this mass chaos in the United States during the event of these, you know, these crises, is that people have a plan, or they think they have a plan. It doesn't go as deep as it needs to. That's the first problem. And then two, they're checking a box to satisfy some type of state mandate or governmental mandate. And then they put that plan on a shelf, and then they forget about it, and then they don't practice on it, right? You know, the first and the most important thing to any you know, active shooter or any type of crisis is knowing the plan, and then how do you communicate, right? And we can get in, I can talk for 8 hours about communication. It's also having hard conversations with those stakeholders within your community. If it's a school, if it's a corporation, I encourage you, bring in your law enforcement, bring in your medical professionals, identify people within your own staff. You know, one of the things that we did at Texas City ISD was we sent out a survey to all 1,000 of our employees, our full-time employees, and we assessed our own staff and said, hey, listen, who has been in a combat zone? Who has a license to carry? Who has, you know, maybe medical experience? Who knows, you know, are you a nurse? Are you a, you know, a CNA? And we identified people, and then we started building our plans based upon the assets that we had. And so, you know, listen, nobody's saying that you have to participate in those particular surveys. Some people are very private, But as a business owner, as a school district, you need to know that sometimes the talent that you're seeking is right there already on your staff. So, there's so many ways to do this, right? But I talk about the 4 Ps, and that's the people, the plan, the products, and the process. And it's just like building a home, or some type of structure. The foundation is the people. The people are going to, a very well-trained staff is going to make the difference between life and death in some instances. In primarily most instances, because law enforcement and medical are responsive only. We have to have a cultural mindset that we are going to have a proactive approach. And well, what's that proactive approach look like? It's everything from building your plan, to identifying your staff, to training them, to having frequent training, not just once a year. One of the things that I have heartburn about is that in the United States, most law enforcement agencies only require their officers to shoot once a year. That is not enough. And then, you go into, how do we identify these behaviors in these individuals? You have to have a mental health piece. If it's in school, if it's in, a corporation, your HR needs to be very well read in and very well versed on identifying these behaviors in certain individuals. Because listen, it's not always a student, it's not always a kid that is the attacker. It can be anyone.
Can we talk a little bit about, and I don't know if this is what you're referring to as emotional intelligence, but you always, not always, you hear about the domestic violence situation, the spouse or paramour who comes to the work to specifically shoot the other person. You hear about people who are suicidal, and in the process between being suicidal, they become homicidal. What do y'all suggest? What do you suggest as to reading people, things that, and you're right. I mean, I'm not saying that HR should be asking people, hey, anybody getting in a divorce, let us know. So, we go ahead and keep our eyes open and our ears to the ground. But what do y'all suggest as to becoming more emotionally intelligent?
Right. And like I said, I would never encourage, asking in those particular situations. HR really doesn't have to ask those questions, because people are going to know if there's something catastrophic going on in a coworker's life. They're either going to share that, or it's going to show in their performance or in their attitude, right? There's going to be certain signs and symptoms that always happen prior to someone wanting to take their own life or take the lives of others. That person usually becomes withdrawn. That person, in some instances, sells off some of the most important things in their lives, or they make amends with individuals prior to attacking or taking their own life. There's all the National Threat Assessment Center at the United States Secret Service since 1999, after the Columbine shooting, has identified all of these things. One of the most, I think it's one of the most telling examples of signs and symptoms of pre-attack behavior over an extended period of time was the 2013 report that the National Threat Assessment Center at the Secret Service put out on the James Hodgkinson shooting. He was the congressional softball game shooter. And you saw that this individual had, aggressive behavior to his neighbors, aggressive behavior to his family. He had issues at work with compliance. And then there's always usually some type of event that pushes that person over that threshold where they've decided that they're going to carry out their attack. In his case, it was politically motivated. It was the election. And so that's what, pushed him over the limit. But, talking about social emotional learning or emotional intelligence programs, the United States over the last couple of decades has done a disservice to the American people by cutting mental health resources. And, I was telling JR the other day, I live on the coast of Galveston, south of Houston. And if an individual is seeking to harm themselves or others and they don't have insurance, the medical facilities here in our area will not take them. They have to be transported to the north side of Houston to be admitted for a 72-hour involuntarily hold so that they can be evaluated. And so we've got to get better at putting pressure on our politicians to make them understand that we're living in a different society, that we need those services. And one of the things that's really been irritating me is that you're starting to see politics, really drive a wedge in some of the things that I believe are crucial in our schools, like social emotional learning and emotional intelligence programs. We work with M6 Global works with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Adam Sines. He's a Hispanic individual that grew up in the South Texas, that works out of Texas A&M or the College Station area, who provides a very, very robust social emotional learning program where he comes in, he teaches schools and staff members all of these things that they need to know about not only themselves, but about their students, and identifying those behaviors in those students, and then has a plan to address and mitigate those, and provides resources for those students or even staff members. And so we've got to get to a point where we're not letting politics continue to keep out certain things that we need in our schools, because our society has changed to become a more violent society. So, the signs and symptoms are key. Those are things that we all see every single time. After every shooting, the first person they interview always says, yes, I knew that this person had a problem. They were aggressive. I mean, Ramos and Uvalde was carrying around a bag full of dead cats. That's probably a sign or a symptom that something is wrong with this individual, along with the fact that he had missed over 80-something days of school.
Well, as Gisela was talking about the emotional intelligence, and what I want to talk about is the lack of intelligence. I don't want to get political here, but Mike, as I said earlier, you and I, we had an interview on the podcast Latino Business Report. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to hear more about Mike and some of the candid conversations we've had, please, you can find Latino Business Report anywhere you listen to podcasts, or you can go to our website at latinobusinessreport.com and listen to that episode. But on that episode, Mike, and that's what I wanted to bring up, we talked about the fact, you gave a scenario of an 18-year-old walking into a store to try to buy a beer. Can you kind of cover that? And I think that in itself for me really resonated well, because it kind of painted a clear picture of some of the things that we're facing in our society today when it comes to being able to purchase a gun.
Yeah, and I know you said you don't want to get political, but I'm going to go there just a tad bit. We have allowed politics to continue to allow these things to happen, because neither side is willing to concede. You've got the left arguing that we need to take away guns. You've got the right saying we need to arm more people. I will tell you right out of the bat, for my educators that are on this call, I do not believe that arming teachers at will is the answer. I am a conservative, but I'm also a very centered conservative who I don't care if you're left or if you're right. If you have a good idea, you have a good idea. And let's work together to resolve this, because the future of America, our kids are at stake. They're the ones that are suffering. And so what I'm getting at is that, the scenario I gave JR was that, listen, as a Second Amendment advocate, as a person who is an avid hunter and owns many weapons and carried a weapon for a living for a very long time to protect myself and others, I have no problem stating that an 18-year-old should not purchase a weapon. And I'll give you the scenario I gave JR. I talked to a friend of mine who is the president of the Texas Medical Association. And after Uvalde, we talked about this. And I asked him, why is it that an 18-year-old can't walk into a convenience store and purchase an alcoholic beverage? And he says that from a medical perspective, a lot of people would say that they, are not mature enough, that it clouds their judgment. And so my follow-up is that, okay, that kid walks into a convenience store to purchase an alcoholic beverage. They can't buy it because it clouds their judgment, but they walk across the street and they go into a gun store and they look into a cabinet and they ask to purchase a Glock 19 handgun, and they're told, no, they can't do that because they're not of age. They're not mature enough to handle a Glock 19 that has a capacity of 17 rounds. But in the same breath, he can look over in the same cabinet and say, well, give me that AR-15 that has a higher foot pounds per second for that round in particular, and a higher capacity magazine, and he can buy as many rounds of ammunition as he can. We have a problem with politics. This is the problem. We have to have common sense laws. An 18-year-old has no business purchasing an AR-15 rifle. I stand firm on that, and if it hurts me later on, I really don't care. But this conversation has to get serious, and we have to put our heads together as Americans and as Texans. Listen, it's not going to stop everything, but it will reduce and it will allow for people to intervene. If Ramos would not have been able to purchase that weapon, maybe he would have been able to seek that weapon through other means, but it would not have been as easy as walking in and purchasing 2 AR-15s and thousands of rounds of ammunition to kill 19 innocent children and 2 innocent, beautiful teachers. So we've got to get real here in the state of Texas and in the United States. You know, taking away people's Second Amendment is not the key, is not the answer, but we have to be willing to concede for the sake of our future.
Nor, I think, is buying millions and millions of dollars worth of shields to protect you against something.
That that has been
another story.
It's been irritating me for a while. You know, we have a lieutenant governor that's talking about, you know, the answer to this problem is that we need more shields, and that could not be further from the truth. We had shields in Uvalde within 3 minutes. It didn't stop anybody. Those shields, if we're going to buy $50 million in shields, I hope that they come equipped with intestinal fortitude and courage, because you can't buy that. You either have it or you don't have that. And so let's get real, you know. But, you know, guys, here's the thing. At the end of the day, we can no longer wait on our politicians to do what's right. We can no longer wait on new legislation. You as an individual, as a parent, as a, you know, community member, as a business owner, it is incumbent upon you to find what is going to provide you peace of mind. If that's taking a class, whether it be a firearms class, whether it be a situational awareness class, whatever it is, you need to do that, because that is going to be what's going to save you. You are the first responder on that scene in the event something happens while you're right there. The first responders that we have coined first responders, we love them and we need them, and they will come, but they're not going to be there in that crucial time period where it may mean the difference between your life or someone else's, by you applying a tourniquet, by you applying a chest seal. And, you know, if we get into this mindset of the OODA loop, and it was a General Boyd or Lieutenant Colonel Boyd, the military terminology of the OODA loop, that's observe, orient, decide, and act. That is the question that you need to be asking yourself, or that is the mindset that you need to have at getting in that OODA loop. Is if something happens, you're orienting yourself to it. You're observing it, you're orienting yourself. Maybe it's, you know, turning your body, maybe it's getting behind cover, concealment. You're deciding what you're going to do, and then you're going to act. And then you get constantly back in that until you have sought, or until you have reached a place of refuge, whether it be for you or for someone else.
Great. Now we're going to start on the downside to wrap it up. Pauline or Cortland on the back end, I'm not sure if we can kind of open up if somebody wants to ask a question. Can't guarantee we're going to be able to get to all of them, but Gisela and I will be monitoring that and kind of going back and forth. I do want to take this while we're opening that process up to thank Texas Mutual Insurance. This webinar is made possible through help with Texas Mutual Insurance. They're one of the partners in TAMACC. And folks, if you like what you're hearing, please go to our TAMACC website or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get your feedback, what you've thought of this, because we want to do more like this in the future. As Pauline said earlier, TAMACC is a 47-year-old organization. We've been serving the Hispanic and business community for over 47 years now, since 1975. But we want to make sure that we provide you with value when we come to these webinars. And I'm looking at the numbers, and I'm very happy to see that since this thing has started, we're still at about 97, 98% retention of everybody who started. So they've been with us. Here we are 40 minutes into it already, and everybody's still holding. So let's open up some of those questions. And one more time, we would love to hear from you. You can find us on the website, and to find out more information about Mike and some of the conversations we had, Mike with M6 Global, not of Her Majesty's Queen Service, Secret Service, Gisela, but MC Global. And you can catch that on the LatinoBusinessReport.com, or just put in Latino Business Report anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you'll find that. So Gisela, why don't you ask another question? And I'm going to scan the questions coming in to see what we have.
Sure. So I want to go back a little bit. So what I've heard, and to encapsulate, is know your own triggers, take personal responsibility, be proactive, be aware of your surroundings, make a plan, train. So let's go back to the know your own triggers, right? Because sometimes we're our worst enemies. And I'm now looking at the gentlemen that are with us. And sometimes, once again, I'm 56. And so I grew up, and, sometimes you got in fights because that's what, boys do. But we live in a different world. So know your own triggers. Tell me about how we need to, act differently in different situations, whether we're drinking, whether we're at a sports game, whether we're on the highway. What are your suggestions of knowing our own triggers? What makes us more confrontational, maybe?
Well, I think that we all know what's going to set us off individually. We know what's going to do that. I think that the most important thing is to understand that, and just know that you have to make a conscious decision to not allow that to get you to that place where you may not be able to recover from. And so, I just saw one of the Q&As, someone pointed out that, neuroscientists have, said that the brain is not fully developed until you're 25. I think for most men, sorry guys, but it may be until we're about 40 or never.
Yes.
So I think it's just like walking into a restaurant. It's consciously being aware of your surroundings, consciously being aware of your triggers, your behaviors, and how you're going to respond, and just not letting that dictate what you're going to do. Listen, I think that in the United States, there's this stigma around mental health. Okay. And I'm going to share something personal with you guys. I myself have suffered depression. That's tough for me to say. I would have never said that. I lost my father 3 years ago, and I was in a very deep, dark spot. And some of the things that I was teaching about self-reporting and recognizing these behaviors in other people, I was starting to recognize in myself. And so what I will tell you, men, ladies, we are living in a different society. A lot of things nowadays are definitely more acceptable than when we were growing up. I'm 45 years old. Men did not go seek mental health when I was a kid. It's just how I was raised. But what I will tell you is that me consciously being aware of the things that were setting me off, that were putting me in that depressive state after losing my father, it made me realize that maybe I do need some help, and that I did go talk to a mental health professional. And guess what? I'm better for it. I understand now what's going to set me off, put me in that state. And I know how to better cope with those things. And so, listen, I've talked to Dr. Sines about this ad nauseum. If I have to be the spokesperson for mental health for men like me who are type A personalities, then so be it. I am not ashamed. And so, I would just tell most people, or tell everyone who's watching today, is that if you need help, please don't ignore it. It's, you have a long life ahead of you. You are valuable to someone. You're loved. You're here for a reason. So find that reason, go seek help. It'll change your life.
Good advice, Mike.
And JR, I saw a question that I definitely want to hit on, which is our society with their heads in their iPhones, their heads in their iPads, their AirPods on, to where you can't even hear. You see people walking all the time. We see all the TikToks about people, falling into a fountain because they're not even paying attention to what they're doing. Mike, can you address how we really need to stop that?
Yeah, we do. We need to stop that. I say all the time that one of the greatest inventions ever was the cell phone, but it's also one of the worst. Technology can be phenomenal. And, in the plans that we build, we incorporate technology with the physical security piece, with the mental health piece. But what I'll tell you is that I believe that our society has become a more violent society because of our infatuation with needing that instant credibility, or instant
Maybe that instant gratification.
Sorry, that's what I was looking for. Instant gratification. We live in a world of likes. And what I mean by that is, you talk to our kids. If I've got an 18-year-old, or about to be 18, and a 16-year-old, and the things that get them most upset is, did someone leave them unread in a chat, or did someone not like their post, or whatnot? And there's so much more to life. And so I will tell you that from a situational awareness piece, be present. You go to you go to a restaurant, and families of 4 are all, consumed with that device. Put that thing down. Ask your kids what's going on. That is how you're going to be able to determine whether your kid, or yourself, or your spouse is in a position where they may be in crisis as well. And so, walking through a parking lot, keep your head up, keep your head on a swivel, work through that OODA loop, like I said, 5-10 seconds of just planning, working through that OODA loop, identifying certain areas of concern, and then formulating a small, hasty plan of how you're going to respond is key. And so, I could do this for 8 hours, guys.
Yeah,
well, JR.
Unfortunately, we don't have that as a great question.
I know.
So thanks. I do have one more to be the last question, and we're going to wrap it up with Pauline. There's so many good questions, guys, in the notes, and please give your comments, and we'll record those and try to post those. Mike, we'll give your information on our TAMACC website, and this recording is going to be it is recorded, and next week we'll put it up, and we'll put your information there if they want to contact you. But what is the biggest mistake somebody can make if they find themselves in a active shooter situation?
Is not making a decision at all. Not making a decision at all. You have to do something. Doing nothing is going to be the demise of you. I have this question asked all the time by teachers, and even by parents, is, we have a standard that says that, in the event of an active shooter, we lock down, locks, lights, out of sight, go to your hard corner. Parents always ask me, well, what if my kid can run out of the door? In the past, school districts have said, no, you need to go into the classroom. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? If you can safely run out of that door and run a block away to safety, that's what you need to do.
Makes sense.
You are responsible for you in that event, but doing nothing is going to get you hurt. And so you have to do something. Observe, orient, decide, act. Once you make that decision, then you observe, you orient, you decide, you act. Then you make that decision, and then it's that loop. You just keep moving
And
on.
at the and all the action should go towards get the hell out of there. Just get out
the hell out of there. Yes, 100%. So,
all right.
I real quick, I can answer any questions that anybody wants to send me a question directly to my email. I'll be happy to answer those direct with you guys at Matranga at m6globaldefense.com. We can come out and do your plans for you. You know, I would love to get a hold of someone in Uvalde. I would be willing to do their assessments for free if someone had a connection there. But we'll chat. So sorry, JR.
No, Mike, that's very generous. And we do have some connections out in Uvalde, and maybe we can get somebody to take you up on that. Before I turn it back over to Pauline to close us out, Gisela, do you have anything? And Gisela, thank you so much for being here today. It's always a pleasure seeing you. And,
thank you for inviting me. You know, Mike, thank you for the information. You know, very on topic, very timely. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It is an honor, guys.
Pauline, can you take us out, please?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. One, for everyone who was on here, but most of all, Mr. Michael, your information was incredible. It was definitely hearing and seeing on what we need to know. You know, whenever we talk about all of these victims, and there was a person who wrote in here as a reminder, you know, just because they're victims and unfortunately we had to bury them, there was a lot more victims. Think of all of the students there in Uvalde, all of the families that are still alive, that are still victims. So there are so many more that we do not look at. And for all of the attendees being here today to recognize and to know that you need to learn more to be able to keep yourself safe, to be able to keep your family safe and your community safe. We thank you for this, and we will continue to provide more information. TAMACC is here as a resource. We are excited to continually bringing you different webinars that is going to help you, your business, and your community. Mr. Michael, we greatly, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. As a former law enforcement officer, I can relate to a lot of what you said, but I've been out of it for a while and definitely not at your level, sir. Mr. JR, thank you so much for everything that you're doing, and with the Latino Business Report, which is very important. And there are so many good podcasts on there and different people that you've interviewed. It's a reflection of the community, and there's some people that are doing some great things out there. Please listen to the Latino Business Report. And to my dear friend, Justice Triana, it is always a pleasure to have you on and to be able to share time with you. You are truly an amazing woman. For everyone, thank you very much. Go grab some lunch. We will be posting this on our website. Follow us, come to our events, participate, be in the present, and stay safe.